we just reverse what we did. Put the cap back on, the filament base, screwed it on, put the anode back in. We'll close that up. We won't tighten these down until we pull it under vacuum. So I like to pull this under vacuum before we tighten up the set screw. And then now we'll put a new aperture. So in the toolbox, you have 3 different sizes. So I know this, and they're labeled. This is 0.7 millimeters is the final aperture. The ones in the column are 1 millimeters. And this is all in the manual too. If you forget, it's in the instruction manual. And then these guys, these are really small. They're like 0.03 millimeters. They're in the column liner, the thing we took out, but the very last one.
Okay.
So usually just get a pair of tweezers. And I'll stand this up. You just want to make sure you grab one. Drop it in there. And just tap it down, make sure it's laying flush, flat down. Take the cap. And just make sure you see the aperture in there. Sometimes when you do that, I've had it where it'll fold over and you screw it down. Yep. So you just want to make sure you didn't pinch it over. And then now we'll just screw this back on so it's holding it. And then we'll go ahead and do the reverse. Tighten it and then loosen the bottom, and this comes out. And then now we can reinsert the backscatter detector so we don't forget later. Put the tool back in the toolbox and the apertures. All right. So now after we've cleaned things and polished it, we want to pump down the system again. We can load our sample at this time too, but we're not going to turn it on right away because the polish and whatnot's going to outgas for a little bit. So we're going to let it pump for an hour or so before we turn it on. All right. So now that it's pumping on there, I'm going to go ahead and snug these down. So yeah, we'll let it pump and then we'll come back. align it. Since we had opened this up, we'll still check the alignment and check the image again. Like I said, hopefully it's it's the same or better is what we're looking for. So
Said it pumps for an hour.
yeah, after at minimum. I mean, ideally the longer is better, but um, it wasn't that dirty to begin with. So, and then for the yearly PM, then we would change the oil and the pump and the filter. Um, but yeah, so we are back after letting pump for an hour or so. If you have more time, the longer you let it outgas, the better. So we're just going to start. We've already loaded our sample. It's pumped down. So we're just going to start turning the beam back on. So we're just going to find a spot to focus on. And we're going to do the optical axis alignment since we opened up the gun. And I'm just going to follow the steps. The first one is make this as bright as possible. Then the next step is to center this up. And the last step is to center the spot in the I'm going to go to reduced area and just refocus and stigmate. And then I'm going to check my aperture line. All right. So we did that at spot 50. We do the normal alignments. And now I'm going to try and maximize it for the best image. So I'm going to go to a smaller spot size. So 5 is where we did it before. Check our. So, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but this is definitely looking better than before. Like we can see more detail. We're seeing these smaller spots. We weren't really seeing that before we cleaned it up. So we'll capture that. We still have our old one. We can pull that up to compare it once this is captured. So I also noticed our filament went back to the yellow. So maybe that's just how this filament is. Um, we'll just monitor it. Um, So this is the first image we took, and you can tell it's a lot cleaner on the camera. You can see the difference. So what did we do? We cleaned the column. Um, Probably the main thing was the final aperture, because that's where all our focus and stimulating are done. It's right at the bottom there. So if that aperture's dirty, you might not be able to tell with the naked eye, but changing that aperture, the fixed aperture, definitely cleans the image out. So. So once again, your images, you might look at a couple thousand X. That's why we push it, 80,000, 100,000. So, if you can get that, we should be able to get instant images that we check the image, and then now we also check the mag calibration. So I'll load a different sample in and check to make sure the scale bar, and everything is calibrated properly. So I just put in a grid that we know known dimension. And so for this, we're going to do it at the 50 spot and 10 millimeter working distance. So to line these bars up, remember to go to the horizontal tool. Here. Snap it in the line. bring up our data, our measurements, and so each one of these squares should be 25.4 micron. And the X. So usually that we never have an issue with that, but we just check it to make sure. Hitachi folder, go back to get whoever have questions, customer has questions. So yeah, that pretty much does it for the normal maintenance. As you can see, it wasn't that dirty. There wasn't a lot to clean this time, but it did improve the image quite a bit. Yearly maintenance, the other thing we'll do is change the oil in the filter in the pump, the roughing pump, clean the gun again in the column. We may change the apertures in the column, they look dirty. And then there's also a turbo pump inside that has a oil reservoir, and that's recommended to be changed every 3 years. So there's a timer in the software that'll this time, yeah, everything's looking good now, and that's it for the maintenance. We remove our sample, and then we'll remember to pump this down. I'll change the shutting it out.